Hello everybody and welcome to the Sheet Show. I'm Carissa Barnes and I'm going to be your host talking all about Google Sheets. Alright, so you already heard my name. My name's Carissa Barnes. You're probably wondering, who is this chick? So I am the only ITRT for Lancaster County Public Schools in Virginia, and this is my very first year in the position. Talk about a really crazy year to go ahead and start an instructional technology resource teacher job. I am a Google Level 2 certified educator, and I'm thinking about over the summer potentially going into the little bit more advanced Google realms, but sort of dove completely into Canvas this year, trying to help my staff figure out Canvas and just get through that part. Before I became an ITRT, I was a middle school math teacher, and really one of the best times that I noticed how powerful using technology in the classroom would be was when I almost eliminated that "is this right?" question. Oftentimes, a lot of students would raise their hand, ask me if a question was right, and if I didn't get to them within 5 seconds of them raising their hand, sometimes they would act out and they would stop working. So I tried to find as many different ways as possible to sort of get students to be self-checking, for me to do a little bit of work ahead of time, so that way it's saving me time when the kids are actually in the classroom. They get that immediate response as to whether or not something is right. They get that instant gratification. And pretty much the rest of this unit, or this rest of this presentation, is going to be all about how you can use Google Sheets to do that. And you can always find me by following me on Twitter at BarnesITRT. All right, so we're going to hop into the next tab over here, and we're going to talk about why Google Sheets. So just to name a few reasons why we should be using Google Sheets, it can be distributed to your students the same exact way that other Google apps are. If you're using Canvas, if you're using Google Classroom, anything along the lines of that. It's easy to share with your team members. You just go ahead and you click that nice little share button over there. It can be completely customizable. You can pick and choose what you want responses to say or not say. It's a great way to mix things up for your students. Oftentimes, a lot of students probably have seen a bunch of drag and drops in Google Slides. This just kind of mixes things up a little bit. I would rotate between doing a Google form, a Google slide, and a Google Sheet, just to keep things a little bit fresh for my kiddos. And lastly, it provides instant feedback for the students. I can't stress that enough. As a math teacher, they want to know right away if they're right or wrong. And you can teach them how to check their answers, but they still even check their answers and they still want to know if they're right or wrong because they want to make sure that they did the check right. So this is just a really great way in a classroom setting just to let them know how they're doing, and they can keep trying until they get it right. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk about a couple of formatting tips before we go ahead and get started. So looking at some of these formatting tips over here, these are my favorite buttons in Google Sheets. We have the Merge Cells button, the Vertical Align button, the text wrapping button, Horizontal Align button, the Paint Format, and then the feature to adjust your size, the cell sizes. So something that I like about the Merge Cell, Vertical Align, and the text wrapping, and I'll show it over here. If you're giving directions to something, you want to type as much as possible so that students know what they need to do. All right, so what I like to do is I like to merge the cells together, and I'm going to say, okay, I want the directions to be in this space over here. So I'm going to come up to my toolbar and I'm going to merge the cells together. Okay, well now it's all cut off. That's where your text wrapping comes in. So you're going to go to your text wrapping and select the middle icon, so that way it wraps along. And I usually like to have a vertical alignment straight in the middle of the cell. This way, if I change my fonts and I change the size, it still will be a little bit bigger, but still is in the center of the cell. The horizontal alignment, you can always turn it into the center. And fun fact, I am someone who loves control commands. In any Google app whatsoever, if you do Control-Shift-E, it's going to center it for you. Control-Shift-L puts things to the right. Control-Shift-R moves things to, or Control Shift L moves things to the left, Control Shift R moves things to the right, but Control Shift E centers stuff. I can't tell you how much time that saves me from clicking to center the whole entire time. Control Shift E, make a note. And then your paint format button here is just a way to say, okay, I like the way that this is formatted and I want that to happen in this cell over here. And now if we type something similar, it goes ahead and copies it the same exact formatting for me. Just kind of a neat trick that I like to use, and I'm going to do Control Z to get rid of that. The adjusting cell size feature, that's going to be seen when we're doing our color by number. But something that it sort of does is you can select multiple columns, and I want all of these columns to be about yay big, we'll say. It adjusts the size to all of them at the same time. You also can have your selected columns, right click, and say resize. Typically they're 100 pixels, so I'll reset them back to normal. Those are just some formatting tips in order to help make things look a little bit more like a worksheet perhaps for your kiddos when you're getting used to it. These were most of the tools that I used when creating these next 3 different worksheets that you're going to see. So I now am in this conditional formatting tab at the bottom, and this is the first kind of worksheet that we're going to take a look at. Just a disclaimer, not a science teacher. I just wanted to try to get different subjects, try different things, so that way you guys can get your brains stirring and moving and grooving in different ways. So here we have a plant cell, and the students need to label the part of the plant cell based off of the word bank that I have provided for them. Now, as you can see, I did provide a word bank, and I made it kind of difficult for the students to copy and paste. There's a reason for that. Sometimes when if a student is copying and pasting a word, it might cause a little bit of the formatting issue, which we had already set up. But I'm just going to go ahead and show you what I did first. So this is a worksheet that came from Math Worksheet for Kids, Science Cells, a Plant Cell, and I just took a picture, I put it into a Google Drawing, and then I added the lines and I labeled the really, really pretty 1 through 7. And then I went ahead, downloaded this image, and I then inserted an image. Either I did over the cells or in the cell. It doesn't really matter so much. This one ends up being in the cell, but as you can see, I ended up merging a whole bunch of cells together. If I unmerge them, it gets really, really teeny tiny, all right? So I took all of the cells that I wanted and I merged them together. Now, if you went ahead and you did it over the cells, you still can later put them into the cell, and hopefully I'll be able to show you that later. But if you put it inside of a cell, it just kind of locks it down a little bit more, so it's harder for the students to move things around. So I know sometimes in Google Slides, you put things as a background, so that way kiddos can't move it. If that's the case, I would definitely lock it into a cell, so that way the kids have a harder time moving it around. All right, so we want to look at number 1. We need to label number 1 from our word bank, and that is the mitochondria. And now the instructions say be sure to hit enter after you type. When I hit enter, look what just happened. It turned green. All right, in the instructions, it says if your answer is correct, the box will change to green. Now, something to be aware of, because I had filmed this before, and I totally butchered the way that I spelled mitochondria. All right, I was missing, I almost had a Q in there. I don't even know what I was doing. All right, so if you spell it wrong, it's not going to be in there. So that's definitely why I would suggest, if you're doing some kind of label the picture, that you have some kind of word bank involved here, so that way the students know, why did I pick such hard words to spell? All right, that way the students know that that's how they spell it, but it's hard for them to necessarily copy and paste it. So if we see we copy it, if I paste it, all right, that one still ended up copying over, but sometimes it's not always the best. So I would definitely say just having them go ahead. All right, now we look at number 2, that is a chloroplast. I'm so sorry if I'm spelled. All right, it's correct. All right, number 3, why don't we just say it's the cell wall? We hit enter. Oh, okay, I guess that's not right. So we need to go back and we need to change what the actual answer is. I would say we definitely want to make sure that we are using the backspace button instead of the delete button. Sometimes that does change things, and this is the Golgi apparatus. Oh, okay, this one, it ended up still working. But this is something that's just a really cool way to bring a little bit of life to your worksheet. The student knows right away if they are right or wrong, which is just a really useful thing for them. It might help them build their confidence a little bit, or it might say, hey, I really don't know what I'm doing. Maybe this is the time for me to ask a question. And you can be either, if your students are in the classroom, you can be walking around looking to see how kids are doing. So that way you know how it's going to be. So how am I doing this? I mean, yeah, it looks really cool, but how are you doing it? So this is the more basic feature. And what we're going to do is, so number 4 over here is this nice blue section. It's that word. All right, it's the vacuole. I'm so sorry, all you science teachers out there. All right, and so we're going to go to our answer box. We're going to click format, and we're going to hit conditional formatting. All right, so in the answer box, format, conditional formatting. So number 4, I'm going to just toss that real quick. We're going to click add another rule. So we have our ranges selected. I see the cell over here. And the reason it's H through K is because I merged some cells together. I love me merging some cells. I will merge cells all day, every day, and not just the plant cells, if you catch my drift. I'm by myself. I'm sorry. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, okay, if the text is exactly, and we want to make sure that we are spelling it properly. Now, okay, I want this. Oh, yep, and thank you for spell check for telling me that I don't know how to spell something that I'm looking at right in front of me. Okay, so if the text is exactly our right answer, what we want to go ahead and do is we want to, maybe we want to make it a darker green, and we want to make it bold, and we want to italicize it, and we can hit done. So now when I type, it automatically changes for me. It's so cool. It is such a cool tool. All right, once again, I'm going to go ahead and show you. So I'm going to click this answer box, format, conditional formatting. All right, I want to add a rule. I have my range, text is exactly, put the right answer, decide what I want it to be. Now, you can also do something else that's a little interesting. You can say, well, okay, what if it's wrong? Maybe you want something to happen if it's wrong. You can do that as well. So we can add there can be multiple rules to the same cell. So we say, okay, if this text does not contain, all right, so it does not have the word, number 5 is the nucleolus. All right, if it does not contain nucleolus, that's not the right answer. And so you can actually hit default and we can say, oh no, it's going to be wrong over here. And we can say done. Now, the problem, not the problem, but something that I see is that, oh, well, it's wrong because it doesn't have nucleolus in here yet. So of course it's wrong because it's not right. All right. So what we want to do, so here, if they put nucleus, it's still wrong. If we put cell wall, still wrong, anything along the lines of that. But it's not really like giving an effect of yes, you're right or no, you're wrong. All right, so something that you want to do perhaps is add a third rule, and you want to say if the cell is empty, we just want to leave it blank. All right, okay, but it's not that. This follows the rules as it goes along, so you can drag and say, okay, well, if the cell is empty, we want it to be white, and now look, it's changed. If it says nucleolus, we want it to be red. And if it doesn't say nucleolus, if it says nucleolus, we want it to be green. If it doesn't say nucleolus, we want it to be red. Now, when I come over here, I'm going to type in cell wall. It's not right, all right? I'm going to type in nucleolus, except for I'm going to spell it right, and it's green. All right, I can type in mitochondria. It's wrong. Leave it blank, and it stays blank. That has a little bit more of an effect to it. So let's go ahead and do for number 6. I'm going to say format, conditional formatting. All right, so if the cell is empty, we want to leave it blank. If the cell is exactly the nucleus, we want it to be green. All right, maybe we'll make it be a pretty green, and we'll turn this to like a grayish, bold it. All right, and if it does not contain nucleus, we want it to be red, bold, maybe with a strike through to be like, no, it's not that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead. We are going to have our student, we're gonna type in cell wall because that's one. Oh, okay, well that one's not right. Okay, now nucleus. Okay, that's the right answer. So this is just a way for students to get that immediate feedback as to whether or not an answer is right or wrong. Okay, now this next feature is kind of cool, and it's involving if commands, and we also are going to use the conditional formatting that we used in the previous tab. All right, an if command is something that sort of allows for writing. So conditional formatting is like, hey, if this is what the cell says, we want it to turn this color. Versus an if command is going to say, okay, if the answer cell says this, we want to say this. We want these words to appear on the student's screen themselves. So here what we go ahead and have is, this is a Spanish translation sheet. And so this is going to say, all right, in our answer column, we need to write the Spanish word for red. All right, I added these notes in here in case a student might be colorblind, may not know what the color exactly is. If they hover over the word, they can see that this says red. I did that by right-clicking the cell. I inserted a note, and then I just typed in the word red. All right, now the Spanish word for red is rojo. And now when I went ahead and typed in rojo, I have feedback that says muy bien. Say if I said it was blanco, and it says otra vez, all right? That means we did not get the answer right. We need to try again. So that is what we're going to be doing. So just to show you, we have rojo. Here we have verde. I have to hit enter to see the results. I have azul. And so what is happening here is that I'm using a combination of an if command as well as conditional formatting. And so I have the if command over here. So you can see under feedback, when I click that muy bien, I have all of this crazy mumbo jumbo over here. And that's written right over here. So we're just gonna go ahead and take a look at these commands. And so in order to start a formula, you always, always, always have to have an equal sign. So I'm going to actually just cut some of these, and I'm going to paste it down here. All right, you always have to have an equals sign. So always start with an equal sign, then you're going to write if with a parenthesis. Now I have 2 if commands in here, and part of the reason why is this last bullet point over here. If you have a but in your statement, then you want to have an if statement nested within each other. So what this is essentially saying is if the answer cell is blank, so a student has not typed in the answer, the feedback needs to be blank. But that's why I have the second if in there. But if the answer cell says rojo, we want it to say good job. And if not, we want it to say try again. All right. So the first part, if the answer cell is blank, leave the feedback cell blank. That's in this blue and orange section here. All right. So D6 is where students are typing in their answers. So you can see the column as well as the row number. That's how D6 is formed. The quotation marks, the 2 quotation marks mean it's blank. The comma separates it and then says leave it blank. All right, so the comma says if this is true, this is what we want. All right, but now we have our second if. Now if the cell says red, and we have to always put the answers in quotations. All right, the only exception to that is if you are dealing with numbers, you don't have to put quotation marks around them. But if you want to have the cell say anything, it has to be followed into quotation marks. So if this cell says red, rojo, then we want the cell to say muy bien. If not, that's that comma there, we want it to say otra vez, and then we have two parentheses at the end. The first parenthesis goes with the second if, and the last parenthesis goes with the first if over here. Now, I'm also going to show something a little different, because if we look at this, you know, if I'm a student and I have access to this, I can just pop over into the feedback column, look at the code and see, oh, okay, it says amarillo, so I'm going to just type in amarillo. All right. So some teachers do hide this a little bit, and I can show you just a way to kind of work around that part just a little bit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hop into, let's see, I'll do 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so 8 should say blanco, so I'm actually going to hop into a completely separate column, all right? Oftentimes teachers go all the way to the end, and the way that you can do that kind of quickly is you can hit Control and then hit the right arrow to go all the way to the end. All right, and we're gonna say, all right, if, but because I need to see some stuff, I'd hit Control and the left arrow. So I wanna say if this cell is blank, you know, keep it blank, but if this cell says blanco, we want this totally random column to say yes, and if not, we want this totally random column to say no. All right, so if I write white, it says no. If I write blanco, it says yes. All right, so we are going to go ahead, and now we can hop over here and say, well, if, I think I was in I. All right, if, hold on, let me find my formula. Okay, let me merge these cells together. Okay, coming back. So we have if this cell is blank, we still want it to be blank. But if this cell says yes, we know the answer is correct. We want it to say muy bien. If not, we want it to say otra vez. So now what happens is we say blanco. This column says yes. This column says muy bien. If we said blanca, it says no. It says otra vez. All right. Now, the way that I got these colors to be showing up is just conditional formatting. If I go to Format, hit Conditional Formatting, I know that if it's right, it's going to say muy bien, and if it's wrong, it's going to say otra vez. So I just said, if it says muy bien, make it green. If it says otra vez, make it red. All right, I'm going to copy and paste. All right, and so now I have D21, which is still there, but instead of blanco, I want it to say rosada. All right, and instead of blanco, we want it to say gris. And so now the last thing that teachers tend to do if they don't want students to see this column, in addition to putting it all the way into column Z, which you can put it there and then just, let's just drag and drop it all the way to the end over here. All right, the formula still will stay put. And they also go ahead, they right click the column. All right, so here we're gonna right click this column and they can click hide column. So now when a student goes over here, oops. All right, so I just copied and pasted the formulas as we went along. So here I copied and pasted the formula. Now they don't see what it says, all right? They're going all the way off of Z, so then the students would have to scroll all the way to the side. unhide the column, then look at the formula, which is a lot less likely. And so that is how you can be using if commands in addition to some conditional formatting to give feedback. Instead of saying otra vez, maybe you might want to say, correct, or you might want to say raise your hand. So that way then a student knows if they're right, correct, keep going, awesome. All right. Or maybe if they get it wrong, raise your hand or ask me a question, anything along the lines of that, just so that way your students know whether they get it wrong or right, but then also how you can sort of give them any kind of hint as well. Maybe it's a certain part. Look at example 3 in your notes if they got one part of the question wrong. Anything along the lines of that, anything is possible using these if commands to provide feedback. Okay, the last ones, and this is probably the most complicated one, but it's just mixing everything all up together and just ways to make something really, really cool and really, really fun. So here what we have is we have a lovely picture of a dog because I have all of the answers in here. If you look, if I start deleting the answers, the picture starts to go away, all right? And so what I ended up doing was I'm using a combination of if commands and conditional formatting to make this dog appear as students are typing in the answer. All right, if they type in the wrong answer, nothing's gonna happen. All right, none of the pictures are changing. When I type in the right answer, the picture starts to be completed. So the first thing that I did was I needed to find a picture. All right, so I went ahead and found this awesome YouTube artist who says hello pixel art. He demonstrates how to do pixel art. So I took one of his designs that he was using. He has a whole bunch of different ones, so I just grabbed one. And so as I watched, what he was doing was on grid paper. It was really easy to see. Once again, I highlighted all of my rows. I hit resize columns, so they all were 20. Did the columns, and then I did the same thing with the rows as well. And then anywhere where there was, at first, I just went ahead and I wrote BL, anywhere that there was supposed to be black. So as he was going through, I was writing myself a little code as to what each thing should say. So BR was for brown. I left these ones blank for white. I did P for pink, so on and so forth. Then what I ended up doing was I set up all of my conditional formatting to begin with. So the conditional formatting, I went to Format, Conditional Formatting, and so I then picked black and I said, okay, and I used Apply to Range, and I selected, using Control, all of the cells. So I selected all of the cells that said BL in them. So that way, all I would have to do is say, okay, here's all of the cells that had BL in them. And I say, if it says X, I want them to be black. I know it's a little strange. And then I went ahead and I did the same thing. So then I hit done. I clicked into a brown cell. I selected all of the brown cells. Said if it's X, we want it to be brown, and I also changed the font to be brown. If you don't do that, then you're going to see a whole bunch of X's all over your screen. So I had the font as well as the background color, both the same colors, that way the X's are hidden. And I repeated this process for every single rule. All right, so it's a little crazy looking at my conditional formatting. Over here we have a whole bunch of rules going on. All right, and all of them say, okay, if it's X, if it's X, if it's X, and we don't need that one. Then what I ended up doing was we started typing in our codes. So I ended up going through and I actually put an X in all of these. Now the reason behind putting an X into all of them and seeing the picture itself was so that way when I found the formula that I wanted. So I said, okay, if E10 equals 5, we want this box to say X. If not, we want it to be blank. All right, and the reason behind having these dollar signs in here is because this means it always is going to be E10. It's not going to be relevant to anywhere else, but we actually didn't need that. So I copied the formula. You need to copy the formula. You can't just go ahead and copy the cell itself, because it's also, so like if I copy the cell here and I paste it over here, now oftentimes, sometimes like the yellow comes along with it. It didn't in this case, but it had before for me. So I went ahead and I'm going to copy the formula, and then I would just literally click random cells and paste it into the random cells as they were going along. Now the reason why I typed in X's into all of these was because as I would copy and paste, as I would paste the formula, as you see, it would unhide itself, so that way I knew what I needed to have left. All right, if that makes any sense. So this one right now, you know, would have had an X in it. Right now it has a formula, but then when I pasted it, I said, okay, there's already a formula in this cell. I don't need to put another formula in there. So just sort of went through process of elimination, started eliminating more and more cells as we went along. This one did take a little bit of time, but I'm not gonna lie, this is also one of the first ones that I have done. So as I imagine, as you get a lot better with it and a lot faster with the process, it would work a lot better. But this was just a really cool way to kind of make a worksheet come to life. It's a color by number, but it's digital. It doesn't really require so many supplies. And then you can just sort of pop in and say, oh yeah, okay, look at the numbers real quick, just look at the picture. Awesome, this kid's doing great. And a kid, once again, can get that instant feedback as to whether or not their answer is correct or is incorrect, which is just fantastic. I absolutely love it. This is something that is super cool, and I hope you took something out of this. And if you have any questions, please just tweet at me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed the sheet show. Oh, the sheet show. 1, 2, 3. It didn't work. It didn't work.